Hello everyone, my name is Lukáš Škublík. I work as developer at Evolveum, and today I will tell you about native reports in MidPoint version 4.4. We will say something about the reports before MidPoint 4.4, then we will cover native reports, their types, configuration, usability, and we will look at example of output. Quickly, we will look at a new task, definition for running of reports. And finally, a few words about converting old Jasper report to new native report. Before version 4.4, MidPoint used Jasper framework for reporting. For complex customization of report, we need Jasper Soft Studio. Small changes could be configured in MidPoint via GUI, but we had to modify XML template for Jasper reports directly with a lot of tags and attributes. MidPoint report object contained XML template as string base 64 encoded. Jasper report have been deprecated since MidPoint 4.0 and definitely removed in 4.4. Native reports generate reports based on dashboard object configuration or object collection configuration. So report configuration doesn't need another XML template like the old Jasper report, and we don't have to use any external editor for modifying a report. Creating of new report is very simple. We use already existing dashboard or object collection, or create new, of course, and use it in MidPoint configuration. We'll look at this at a short demo later. One of the requirements for new native reports was supporting multithreading and bucketing. Now, multithreading is supported for all possible kinds of reported objects, such as containers, objects, and audit records. Bucketing is supported for objects and audit records because currently bucketing of tasks don't support containers. Every report output is stored in an export directory in MidPoint home. It is possible to send generated reports to mail using notifier handler. Every report object contains three basic attributes. Behavior represent behavior engine and file format. Behavior represent direction of reports. MidPoint knows two types of behavior. Export is common report like the previous version, which generated a file with reported objects. Import has an opposite way. File with objects will be on input, and MidPoint create object based on row of file. Import behavior is now experimental, and default behavior is export. Engine define object which will be used for generating of report. We have two choices, dashboard and object collection. And finally, element file format represent format of generated file. Default file format for dashboard engine is HTML, and for object collection engine is CSV. First kind of reports is collection report that generate reports based on object collection configuration. Collection reports support audit records, containers, and objects, for example, users, roles, organizations, and so on. Basic part of configuration for collection reports are query, columns, parameters, subreports, and condition. We'll look at this on the next slides. Now we can take a closer look at the engine collection object. First important part of collection object report configuration is query for reported objects. Query represents attribute collection. We have three variants of the disposal. We can use reference to existing object collection. We can write filter directly in collection attribute without base collection, or we write filter and use reference to existing collection as base collection for filter. If we use filter with base collection, MidPoint has two filters for report, one from report and one from base collection. MidPoint concatenates these filters with logical AND. On the side, we can see the example. First filter say that we want to see users with membership in organization Evolveum. Second is for users with role and user. In the result, we will see users that concurrently have membership in organization Evolveum and role and user. Next part of collection report configuration is columns. Definitions for columns contains attribute view. View contains definition for type of reported objects and definition of columns. Configuration of view is used on more places in MidPoint, for example, in admin GUI configuration. Columns for generated report are matched from two views. Views defined in report and view defined in object collection used for generated of reports. In example, on slide, we can see that view in report has configuration for columns name and email, and view in object collection has configuration for columns given and family names. The resulting report will have columns for name, email, given, and family names. Of course, when we want to use only view in report, it is possible by attribute use only report view. We can skip definition of columns, then MidPoint use default view for current type of object. MidPoint contains default view for audit records and for native objects. For example, user type, role type, org type, and so on. But when we want to create report of containers, then we have to define columns configuration. In the upper right corner, you can see an example of configuration of two columns for user, name and full name. Next on side, we see screenshot of GUI on which we can configure columns of report. We can see that GUI configuration contains field for label, but it is missing in XML configuration. It is because we defined path for attribute of user object, and MidPoint will find display name by path and use it as name of column. For collection report, we can configure parameters. They are very important when we want to set import parameter for query. For example, when we often use report for user with membership in role, we don't want to create one report for every role, but we create one report with parameter for role, and before running the report, we set the role parameter. In the upper right corner, you can see example of configuration for activation parameter. Configuration contains name, type, and label of parameter. In center of slide, we see screenshot of GUI with configuration for parameters of report. Usage of the parameter is very simple. We just use the name of the parameter in expression of query. As next part of collection report, we look at subreports. Subreports is a strong function when we want to use another object from MidPoint repository in same column of actual row. We can search another object by actual object from row. We describe it on example. We want to create a report of shadow of all resource. All resource doesn't contain attribute for email address, but we want to see email address in a MidPoint user owning the shadow in report. We create a subreport with search for owner of shadow, as you can see in expression of left code snippet, and then we can use the subreport via its name in the expression of column, as you can see in right code snippet. Type of subreport is collection, but in this case, we know that contains only one value, so we directly use it. Last part of collection report configuration, which we will show, is condition. Condition is very powerful and is recommended to be used only when you don't have any other choice. Using condition have higher performance requirements. When you use condition on user, all user will be requested from repository, and each user, the condition will be verified. So when you can do it via query, do it and try to avoid using conditions. On screenshot, we can see example of generated HTML report of all users in MidPoint. I choose HTML format because of better graphic view. Report contains column for name, full name, administrative status, roles, organization, and accounts of every user in MidPoint. Now we can describe some cases what can do collection report. The first use case is that we need create report for audit events of modifications with column for changed items. In the next example, we need report users with mismatched attributes. So we have to compare attributes of accounts of user and attributes of user in MidPoint. We create example which compare email prefix of user in MidPoint, which first name and last name attributes of accounts change by point. In next, we need create report of users which have not changed in some time. And the last thing is we need report of users which have assignment of role, but don't have account on our resource, and they should have. All these examples with needed configuration you can find in dots. Next engine for reports is dashboard engine. Dashboard engine generates reports by dashboard objects. Dashboard objects can be shown in GUI, as you can see in screenshot. Dashboard contains widget which shows actual state of MidPoint. Documentation for dashboard configuration can be found in the dots. Dashboards support both actual supported file formats, but there is difference. CSV contains only table of widget with a basic message and status. Unlike HTML, which is default showing table for widget and one table for every widget with object which meet the condition in widget. We can turn off this default behavior via attribute show only widget table and show only table of widget. Also, configuration for dashboard report contains a definition for view, but unlike collection report, view attribute in dashboard report is multi-value. We can configure view for every type of object, which are showed via widgets. For example, in our example, it is first line under screenshot. We can see views for types, resource type, audit event record type, and task type. Final view of widget is merged from 3 levels of view. View in report for type of object, view in dashboard for widget, and from view in object collection, which contains configuration for widget. Columns from view are merged in same way as in collection report. Also, we can use attribute, use only report view for using only view defined by report. Dashboard report has two kinds of output. Common case is to generate it output file with reported data. However, it is also possible to save a result of report to dashboard, which configuration was used for generating report. Maybe you ask why. It is very simple. When we click in GUI for showing dashboard, MidPoint synchronously send requests to repository for object because of generating widget on screen. It is all right if we do not have many objects and requests are quick. But when we have to write very long for showing page with the widgets, we can use saving result of report to dashboard and next configure dashboard in order to show this value. Configuration of dashboard report contains attribute store export widget data, and using it you can define whether result of a report will be saved to file, widget, or both. Rule configuration for asynchronous dashboard you can find in dots. On screenshot, we can see example generated reports of dashboard report in HTML format. On top, we see table of widget with name, message, and status. Under table of widgets, report continue with one table for every widget. MidPoint 4.4 and 4.4.1 contains bug when we run dashboard report, when dashboard object contains widget with query that the definition contains expression. This dashboard report can't successful running in MidPoint 4.4 and MidPoint 4.4.1. This bug is fixed on branch support 4.4 and it will work in MidPoint 4.4.2. From 4.4, MidPoint contains three activity work definition for task. First is classical report export definition, then support only multi-threading for containers, objects, and audit records, and it will work for export behavior. Second is classic report import definition that support also only multi-threading, but only for object, and it works with import behavior. Last is distributed report export definition that support multi-threading and bucketing for objects and audit records and work for export behavior. All three definitions work with attribute represent reference for report objects. Classic and distributed export definition work in addition with attribute for parameters. Currently, if we are running report via GUI, then the task with classic report export definition will be created. If we are running report for objects or audit records and MidPoint is running in cluster mode, then we can convert classic way to distributed. We can rewrite it by modifying its XML configuration. In the configuration of task in raw mode, we change report export to distributed report export. We change archetype from report export task to distributed report export task by changing OID for assignment that define archetype. Next, we remove current archetype ref and row member ref attributes for old archetype. And finally, we added the configuration for distribution. Also, we can create new task with a distributed report export definition and set reference to our report. I prepared a short demo about creating new report. We have two choices for it. One of the choices is using classical fork to create a new object. So we find the report menu in sidebar panel. We click on create new report in submenu. And now we can select a kind of report. Now we select a collection report. Now we try create new report for all users in MidPoint. So we set name. In details navigation panel, we can see all configuration possibilities for our report. So now we look at collection. we can see configuration panel for collection and base collection, but now we skip it because we want to create a report for all users in MidPoint. We look at file format. Now we set HTML. We look at view. Now we select type for reported objects. So we select user. And we can see configuration panel for columns, but now we skip it because we want to use a default view for users in MidPoint. In details panel, we can see configurations tab for subreports and parameters, but now we skip it. We click on button Save and Run. We can see that report was successful saved and was create new task for the generate output file. We can click on Show Task link. Now we can see that state of task is success and task processed 11 objects because our demo contains only 11 users. Now we can download report. We open report, and we can see that the report contains 11 users in MidPoint, and we see columns of default view for users. It is columns for name, given name, family name, full name, email, and accounts. Now we can look at a simplify creating of reports. We open table for all users. We use search panel for narrowing the selection. For example, we want report users whose family name contains some string, for example, on. We see that the table contains only 4 users. And now we click on button Create a report under table. Now we see a page for new report as before. We set name of new report. We look at collection. And we can see that filter was predefined by search panel of a previous table. We can see item for substring with path, family name, and value on. Now we look at view. We see that also type of generate reported objects was predefined as user by previous table. Now we click on Save and Run. We can see that the report was saved and will be created a new task. Now we not use Show Task link, but we use left menu. We open Task Servers and Report Task. Now we open task for our second report. And we can see that task processed only 4 objects as we want. We download report. We can see that the report is type CSV. It is because we don't set a file format, and default format for collection report is CSV. So we open report. We can see that the report contains same columns as previous report, but now report contains only 4 users. Now we repeat previous steps, but we generate report for archetype. So we open table for managers, and we can see that MidPoint contains 3 managers. And now we can see that view for archetype managers contains custom configuration for columns, and we see 3 custom columns: full name, nickname, and email. Now we repeat click on Create Report button. We set name of report managers. We set file format as HTML. We look at on view. Now we can see predefined type as previous report, but now we see predefined configuration for columns. We see configuration for columns: full name, nickname, email address as previous table. During configuration of report, we can see on actual reported objects. When we click on button Show Report Preview. After click, we see in the bottom side of page actual reported objects by this report, and we see columns based on our configuration. We try change label for column nickname and reload previous. And we see that label of column nickname was changed. Now we save and run report. We show task. We see that task produced only 3 users. We don't want report. Open. And we see that our report contains only 3 columns by our configurations and contains 3 users managers. Finally, I have one note for you. Okay. Button Create Report under table contains bug in MidPoint 4.4 and 4.4.1. And when you want to use it repeatedly on some table, you have to relog in after every use. It is fixed on branch support 4.4 and it will be work in MidPoint 4.4.2. Okay, we can come back to presentation. Now we can look at how to convert old Jasper report to new native report. We will see it on simplified users in MidPoint, a report that you can find in initial objects in MidPoint. As first step, we have to decode the value of template attribute from base 64 format. We get XML with Jasper report configuration. When we have Jasper configuration, then we can create basic XML of new report. We can use old Jasper report and remove tag Jasper and create tag object collection. Now we can start with converting. As next, we need convert query for reported objects. We find tag query string and copy its filter to tag collection in object collection of new report. Filter from Jasper template contains expression for create object reference type because of as parameter contains string of OID for all. New report can use object collection type and type of parameter, so we can use path evaluator with parameter. Now we need to convert parameter to a new report. So in template, we have to find tags parameter. We create new parameter in new report. We copy name and class name to new report, new parameter, sorry. When we need a reference for object, old Jasper parameter was type string and use OID of object, but new report uses object reference type and target type element in parameter. So we use object reference type instead of string. Also, we can add the label configuration for GUI. As last thing, we need rewrite columns. So we have to find tag with path Jasper report, init details, init band, init text field, and init we see text field expression tag. When column describe attribute of object, then we define path for column. It is easier. Every column can have label, which is shown in header of column, or MidPoint uses attribute name based on path of column. Jasper template can contains complicated columns. When we need to define expression for column, we find tag component element in Jasper in same parent as for text field tag. We find attribute subdataset in subtags and use definition for this subdataset in expression of new column configuration. In our example, we added the code for return only name of resolved rows. As part for new column, we use value of dataset parameter expression. In example, it is assignment. As last, we add the label for new column because we reporting only rows, not all assignment of user. It's all, and we can save and run our new report. So to conclude, using only native reports in MidPoint 4.4, all Jasper report was removed. Using of native reports is really strong. Please have a look, try them, and let us know. We are curious, especially about your experiences with new reports, and we want to know if you're missing some functionality. Everything should be documented, so please have a look at the dots. Thank you for your time. You can follow us on our social media, and now it's time for your questions.